This revenge is so brutal it shouldn't be on the internet. In the year 2000, 4 young climbers, who were all very eager to prove themselves, began a months-long expedition in the southern region of Kyrgyzstan. The climbers were 25-year-old John Dickey, 22-year-old Jason Smith, 20-year-old Beth Rodden, and her then-boyfriend, 22-year-old Tommy Caldwell. The group of 4 spent their very first night on what is known as the Yellow Wall, and it was actually Tommy's 22nd birthday. And so, suspended in their portaledges over 1,000 feet from the ground, Beth sang her boyfriend happy birthday before they all settled in for the night, excited to wake up the very next morning and continue exploring. But instead of doing this, they would end up waking up to literal gunfire. They peered down to the ground below and they saw 3 men kind of waving at them, 3 armed men, telling them to come down. It would turn out that the climbers had been taken captive by a group of Islamic rebels known as the Islamic Movement of Uzbekistan. The rebels and their captives left the base camp behind, carrying as much equipment and food as they could, and they presumably began marching north towards the border with Uzbekistan. The group would trek all the way until the early morning of August 13th. I mean, they basically hiked until they couldn't walk anymore. They were malnourished, they were completely exhausted, and their bodies had begun breaking down to the point where they could hardly travel more than a few hundred yards per day. But on the evening of night 6, Abdul came up with a plan. The 4 American climbers and Sue would go up a mountain, climb nearly 3,000 feet up this really steep slope up to a predetermined meeting point. Abdul would then go off on his own and he would go take a detour, grab some more food and some supplies, and then he would climb up the mountain by himself and meet them at their rendezvous point. And just like that, Sue was now the only person that was left to guard the 4 climbers. On that steep climb up the mountain with Sue, at the very top, right before they had almost finished it, Tommy glanced over at Beth and they silently agreed that it was time to act. And so in a split second, Tommy rushed forward, he grabbed Sue's rifle strap, and he pulled him off the cliff and sent him on a 2,000-foot tumble down into the darkness. That was the last that the climbers ever saw of him. Flash forward a few hours later, and Jason, John, Tommy, and Beth were literally diving into a Kyrgyz army outpost building. They were then given fresh food for the first time in days, by the way. They were given water. Against all odds, the climbers had escaped. Their nightmare was over, and they were now completely free.